In the year of our Lord 1850, in Skipton, a village of charm, was born a babe out of wedlock, a boy with a hand on each arm. Elizabeth James was his mother, a young lass and bonny they say, and though she suffered from bats in the belfry, she were fond of a roll in the hay. Well, she rolled with the lords and the farmers, she didn't know how to say nay, but this time she'd rolled once too often, and she got in family way. Now when 9 months were o'er and done with, a bed in the workhouse were found. He were born at 6 in the morning, and weighed nigh on 25 pound. Well, the strain were too much for Elizabeth, who stood up, then fell down and deed, and child were left in the orphanage, all alone and friendless in need. Then the orphanage warden decided that he'd better give him a name, and they thought it'd name him after some fellow of fortune or fame. Then up spoke the orphanage gardener. Name him after his mother, I vote. We can't possibly call him Elizabeth. I mean James, you stupid old goat. But what of his surname? They cried out. Said the doctor, well, I'll tell you that. 'Cause Elizabeth James, in her last dying breath, said, him as fathered this child were a Pratt. James Pratt is the name we shall give him. I suppose it'll just have to do. So the child grew up in the orphanage, and he grew up, and he grew up, and he grew. And as he grew, it became obvious. He was going to be big, they could tell. By the time he was 7, he stood 5'11". He were fearsome to see, bloody hell. Now the orphanage warden decided he were getting too big to be fed. So they packed the lad off to the workhouse, where he'd have to work hard for his bread. Now James didn't have all his marbles, and not all his chairs was at home, and seeing he didn't like life at the workhouse, he decided he'd set off for Rome. Now all roads lead to Rome, so they tell me, or all roads Rome to Leeds, I'm not sure, but James never left the West Riding, because his sense of direction were poor. He wandered through Barnsley and Sheffield, big cities like Mirfield and Shelf, through Bradford and Leeds at incredible speeds, and some places I've not been myself. Well, he finally settled in Halifax, much to the locals' alarm, where he got a job driving cattle at one of the nearby farms. Now, this considerably brightened his sex life, which till then had been rather dull, and because of his size and strange sexual desires, the farmer soon nicknamed him Bull. Bull Pratt is the name he was stuck with, but he didn't give a damn a hoot, because if anyone said out he didn't like, he'd give him a taste of his boot. One such offender was dangled over Northbridge by his feet. Another was stuffed head first in the sack and left screaming for help in the street. Now, by the time our James had reached 30, or it could have been 31 at a pinch, he stood 6'13", and his eyes, they was mean. He were 5 foot across if an inch. Now, he grown-ups, he were often ferocious, and always prepared for a fight. But the children, they loved and they found him an eternal source of delight. He'd hoist him high up on his shoulders, and they'd go off on a shopping spree, round all the stalls in the market. There'd be cakes and apples and spices for free. And the stall-keepers made no objection. They just stood there, scared out of the wits. Well, what's the loss of one apple? To having your stall smashed to bits. Now, eventually, Bull became poorly. He went completely out of his mind, and with spending the rest of his days in the bin, he eventually became quite resigned. He sat there and dreamed of the long summer's days he'd spent upon Beacon Hill, and the mornings he'd trudged barefoot in the snow to his job up at the mill. He even remembered the workhouse where his eyes had first met light of day, and then in spring of 1918, told chap, he passed quietly away. Now if you go down Stony Royd Cemetery, walk past all them fancy headstones, and there in a plot in an unmarked grave lies Bull's mouldering old bones. And if you go down on a moonlit night, hide behind one of them gateposts, and happen you'll see a 7-foot ghostie knocking hell out of all t'other ghosts.